"Mom, help me, I'm burning." This is the haunting voicemail left by a trapped worker as red-hot molten slag poured around him. And although he could not have seen it coming, this tragedy was far from a random accident. It's a sweltering summer day in Florida, with temperatures soaring to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Power demand is at its peak, and Tampa's electric power plant is already struggling to meet it. Of the 4 massive coal boilers, only Unit 2 is working at full capacity. But now it has become clogged with ash, making the situation even more precarious. So, a senior plant manager rounds up 5 other employees to perform the maintenance. Among them is 21-year-old Antonio Navarrete. He's newly in love and about to become a father. The next day, they are supposed to find out if they are having a boy or a girl. Antonio lives with his parents and is determined to work hard and provide for his growing family. But fate had other plans. He has only been on the job for 4 days and doesn't know he is about to perform one of the most hazardous tasks at the power plant. In front of him stands a massive structure. It's Unit 2, with a humongous 12-story boiler that burns coal to generate electricity. Unlike newer plants, Big Ben's boilers melt ash into molten slag, essentially lava heated to over 1,000 degrees. The slag collects at the bottom of the boiler and dumps into a water-filled tank where it hardens into glassy rocks. But today, the slag has built up and clogged the man-sized hole that it's supposed to drop through. And so the slag keeps building up on top of itself in the boiler. Down in the cooling tank, there's a separate problem. Hardened slag is blocking the grinder that's supposed to break it into small chips for industrial use. The staff needs to fix both of these 2 issues quickly to keep energy production stable. The safe way would be to turn off Unit 2's boiler and fix the blockages. But shutting down isn't quick or easy. It's like stopping a freight train. Cooling the boiler and restarting would take hours, cost hundreds of thousands, and risk power outages. Instead, a decision is made. Clear the boulder in the tank while keeping the boiler running. They are counting on the slag trap above to remain clogged. Experienced employees had voiced their fears, so the company began hiring contractors for these risky tasks. Antonio was one of those contractors, unaware of just how dangerous the situation truly was. Knowing the risks, a shift operator searches for the slag tank water blasting procedure manual, but it can't be found. Without it, no safety briefing is held before the work begins. First, they drain the cooling water that usually cools the slag and reveal the blockage on top of the grinder. Then, they open the door closest to the ground, known as the doghouse door. Antonio watches as the other 5 men take turns firing their high-pressure water blasters through the door at the rocks. Above in the boiler, molten slag pools. It's like standing under a dam with a growing crack, the red-hot slag pressing against it with relentless force. Then, about 20 minutes into the operation, the unthinkable happens. Without warning, the blockage at the slag trap suddenly breaks loose, releasing thousands of gallons of superheated slag from the boiler. The lava gushes out of the tank through the doghouse door and covers the workers. The sheer volume and speed of the molten material are impossible to contain. The workers have no time to react. The slag flows like a river of fire, covering the ground in a pool 6 inches deep and 40 feet wide. The intense heat vaporizes all the moisture in the air, creating a scalding steam cloud that further intensifies the situation. Amidst the chaos, screams of pain and cries for help pierce the air. Some workers are trapped in the cauldron of fire. The advancing molten steam cuts off escape routes, transforming the area into a deadly furnace. In those terrifying moments, Antonio manages to reach for his phone. He dials his mother's number, but she doesn't pick up, so he leaves a voicemail that will haunt her forever. "Mom, help me. Mom, I'm burning. Call the cops." The eruption was swift and merciless. When a 911 call is placed, it's clear the control room has no idea of the full extent of the situation.
Ellsworth County Fire Rescue, what's the address of the emergency? And tell me exactly what happened.
We have contractors here who are opening up one of our slag tanks, and apparently it has blown open and somebody is burnt real bad. There's another man down. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's okay. So there's 2 patients now?
No, officially, I'm calling about 1. Nobody said anything about 2. Nobody's called up here. Nothing official yet.
Okay.
Emergency responders arrive within minutes, but the scene is catastrophic. Senior plant operator Michael McCord and contractor Christopher Irvin are pronounced dead on site. The other 4, including Antonio, are critically injured with severe burns covering large portions of their body, and the prognosis is grim. Burns from molten slag are among the most devastating injuries imaginable, causing irreversible damage to skin, tissue, and organs. All doctors can do is place the survivors in medically induced comas. The tragedy unfolded so quickly that even if medical teams had been on site, it's unlikely they could have saved the workers. Any rescue attempts would have likely caused further injuries as the intense heat made it impossible to pull anyone from the molten slag safely. The most obvious solution would have been to shut the boiler down. So why didn't they? Beyond the cost and time, there was another problem. Tampa Electric struggled to meet the electricity demand, especially with temperatures soaring and the July 4th holiday approaching. Even more people were at home, cranking up their ACs. If they shut down Unit 2, they would have to buy power from other utilities at a much higher cost. So, to avoid outages and meet demand, they made the dangerous choice to try and fix the clog in Unit 2 without turning it off. Another reason was TECO's decision to outsource these dangerous jobs after its workers and union members raised safety concerns, particularly about performing maintenance while the boiler was still running. By bringing in contractors, TECO could continue these high-risk tasks, but the contractors may not have been as familiar with the plant's aging equipment, which only increased the dangers. Although OSHA regulations give workers the right to refuse a job if they believe their life is in danger, despite raising concerns about the risks of working in the slag tanks while the boiler was still operational, the job proceeded with contractors instead. This move also created safety gaps because contractors weren't as closely involved in TECO's regular safety practices, despite what the CEO claimed.
It's a fairly regular activity, and the employees and contractors that were working on scene are very familiar with the procedures.
But the company's later admissions would tell a different story. And it wasn't an isolated incident. In the 20 years preceding the accident, more workers died at Tampa Electric's power plants than at those run by any other Florida utility. TECO registered 10 work-related deaths, while no other utility had more than 3 fatalities. But it's an incident that happened 20 years earlier, almost to the day, that raised a giant red flag. In June 1997, 4 employees were seriously injured when hot slag spewed from a tank during a familiar maintenance operation, causing first and second-degree burns. Sounds familiar? Well, shortly after this incident, TECO implemented a strict policy against performing maintenance on slag tanks while the boiler was operational. But somehow, over the years, the policy simply eroded. By 2015, union members started raising concerns that they were again being asked to work on slag tanks with the boilers running. Federal investigators found Tampa Electric ignored its own rules and initially fined the utility close to $130,000. However, as investigations were ongoing, TECO was ultimately charged with willfully violating work safety guidelines. 5 years after the incident, in May 2022, Tampa Electric admitted skipping mandatory safety training, a simple task that could have saved lives. As a result, The company was fined $500,000 and given 3 years of probation for knowingly violating the rule. For the victims' families, this fine was a mere slap on the wrist. While Tico eventually reached confidential settlements with them, no compensation could ever undo the loss. Despite the best efforts of the medical staff, Antonio Navarrete, Armando Perez, and Frank Jones all died in the days and weeks following the incident. The only survivor was Gary Marine Jr. Antonio's child will grow up never knowing their father, all because of the decisions made that day. Watch this episode next if you found this video interesting. Please add a like and leave a comment if you want to support the channel.